Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the Energy RX. I am so excited to introduce you to our next guest. My next guest, Patricia Awyan Lehman, is an incredible researcher, guide, Egyptologist. She is calling in from Egypt, where she has lived for the past 16 years. I'll tell you a little bit about her. She is a passionate explorer, researcher, guide, storyteller, dedicated to unraveling the mysteries of ancient civilizations and spiritual wisdom. As a co-founder of the Kemet School of Ancient Mysticism, Patricia has spent decades delving into the profound teachings, art, and architecture of Egypt and beyond. With her unique ability to weave history, spirituality, science, and modern insight, Patricia invites us to connect to the timeless truths of our shared human journey. Patricia creates a bridge between ancient knowledge and contemporary life, fostering conversations that inspire curiosity, transformation, and a deeper understanding of the world around us. Whether unraveling ancient symbols or uncovering the wisdom hidden in plain sight, Patricia's thoughtful approach and deep knowledge make her a trusted voice for seekers everywhere. And I think everyone who is listening to the podcast right now is a seeker. So I'm going to invite you to put on your headphones and open your minds, open your hearts to get ready to hear some really beautiful wisdom that Patricia has helped bring forward from ancient people, ancient Egyptians, and I'm excited to hear what she has to share. Thank you so much for coming on, Patricia.
Thank you. Thank you for that beautiful introduction.
Well, I have been so excited. I have followed your work for so long, as I said. We also have a shared birthday, which I think is sort of fun.
Well, that's cool.
Thank you. Because I see your birthday pop up on Facebook. I was like, oh, and I always like, oh, it's just kind of a sister in some ways. This little connection that we have. So I think one of the reasons that I personally am really drawn to you is because you have, it's not just this is what these symbols mean. It feels like you go so deep within Egyptology and what the ancients were trying to tell us, and that you have this very metaphysical approach, and how relevant what they were saying back then is to us today, and how they really were. They spent so much of their time and energy for some reason to leave us these messages to help us in some way. So maybe if you just want to talk a little bit about your journey, how you even came, you were born in the US, how this even happened for you, how this began.
I think it was all meant to be. I think I was born to be here and to be doing this work. I knew as a child that one day Egypt would be home. I looked at, and we talked about this, my father's National Geographics, his coffee table books, all the pictures of Egypt, and I was drawn in. And as I said, as a young child, I looked at these pictures and I just felt this was home. And from that point on, I was naming my cats and my dog. Everything, was all about Egypt. Halloween costumes. And I say this a lot, but this was my truth. This is my childhood. And of course, I explored other things that I liked. I wanted to be an archaeologist. My mother talked me out of it. She said you'd end up as a curator in a museum. Nobody actually gets to be at the digs. But later I thought, well, why did I let her convince me? But when I look back today, I look at how the fact that I'm not involved in academia, that I actually am self-taught. And although I've studied everything about ancient Egypt, and even in college I studied ancient art and symbolism, but being outside of academia allows me to explore and to speak my truth without any kind of confinement or peer reviews. And this is the greatest joy that I have, because I'm not afraid to speak my truth. And I'm not telling anyone that this is factual. I'm actually just opening minds, I hope, to other possibilities. And I was lucky to have some time. I won't say it was a huge amount of time, but I had time with the indigenous knowledge holder, Abdel Hakim Awyan, in Egypt, when I finally did get to Egypt. Meeting him, learning about him. I mean, I had visions. I saw him before I ever got here to Egypt. I saw, where he lived. I saw everything so clearly. in my mind's eye. And coming and meeting him was everything I expected, strangely enough. And, you know, what I found with him is a deep resonance because it was my feeling, my gut, my heart telling me that this was the truth, that what the ancients were really putting forward, the symbolism, the iconography, it isn't as we've been taught, but it's so much deeper, as you said, on many different levels. There's an exoteric meaning, which we can read in books, and it's not necessarily wrong. And then there's an esoteric meaning, which is going deep, deep within. And the way I understand it today, it's every symbol, every icon, every myth has at least 7 levels of meaning. So when you look at a symbol, you can say, you know, this is an ankh. It's the key of life. But if you really delve deeper and you go, you know, to your higher levels or perceptions of awareness, you begin to see that you're looking at the breath of life. You're looking at the womb of the feminine. And that's the Sophia. That's the divine feminine. That's, you know, this is the thing that's been hidden from us for so long in our current perception of reality. And we talked a little earlier about, you know, right brain, left brain perception. And what I'm talking about is when we go deeply back into ancient Egypt, we're looking at a people that was more right brained. You know, and when you understand the difference of right brain and left brain is I call it unity consciousness versus left brain separation consciousness. Left brain is very detail oriented. It's analytical. It loves numbers, math. It loves geometry, it loves measurement. It's time and space. It's linear. And then you go into right brain and it's nonlinear and it feels the currency. It's heart based versus mind based. So it's feeling from the heart, and the heart is connected to all these other dimensions of perception. So that having that mindset, how can we possibly envision, you know, how they perceive the world when we're stuck in this perception that wants to tie everything up in a box, wrap it up, put a ribbon on it, and put a label on it and say it happened then or now or in the future. So we have this need to measure. And can you imagine a society that they felt unified? They did not have a word for death. They called it westing because the sun would rise in the east and set in the west, only to rise again the next morning.
They called it resting.
Westing, as
West,
in
going
setting
west.
in the west, like the sun and the stars and the moon, and rising again in the east.
I didn't know that. That's beautiful.
Isn't
The,
that beautiful?
I want to. I want to. I want to bring that back.
We are at that pivotal moment, and this is what I'm certain of. And I saw this in the temples. I saw this on the ceiling at the Temple of Hathor at Dendera here in Egypt, and I didn't speak about it for the longest time. And then I started talking about it with my tour groups. I started really deeply researching it, and it's really what I've come to understand, even from astrophysicists, that we're at this pivotal moment when everything's about to reverse. Perception itself is about to reverse. And we will start migrating back into a right brain consciousness. So this is the great awakening that we're all talking about. And the ancient Egyptian netters being forces of nature, coming from the hieroglyphs for the consonants NTR, which we would say netter. The Romans and Greeks said nature. And it's where we get our word nature. They didn't see, you know, we think of revering gods and goddesses. They were revering the forces of nature. They were recognizing the power of this map of, you know, our perception of reality. And so they put, you know, it's sort of like archetypal energies that are within and without, above and below. They mirror each other, even explained in how they tell us we create our own reality, because we do. It's always a mirror of what's happening within, mirrors in our outer world, and then is reflected back at us. It's an interesting, constant interplay between, and the way the ancients called it, the two waters of life, the waters of heaven and the waters of earth.
Okay, like as above, so below. Is that what you mean?
Well, exactly. I didn't want to be so blatant, but yes.
I just want to make sure that our listeners, because you and I love ancient Egypt, so our listeners that may not know as much. So I love this concept too of understanding what the gods and goddesses were the netters. So if you could name some of them, so would Isis be a netter, and Osiris and Horus? These are all different gods and goddesses, but they were associated with a force of nature. So we think, as opposed to just seeing the image of the statue represented, I'm worshiping that. It was so much deeper what they were worshiping with what we would call this pantheon of gods, their netters.
I love the way you asked that, because that's exactly the key to the difference. Is we have come to begin to not begin, we have been worshiping something outside ourselves, where they saw the netters. And yes, Osiris and Hathor and Isis and Horus. And actually, you have 5 netters that represent the 5 extra days of our year for when the Earth falls off its axis, and we have these 365 days. These 5 netters, Osiris and Horus and Set and Nebhet and Isis, all represent those 5 energies of the 5 extra days of being out of balance. So I'm not going to go into detail, but this is how they actually, all of the netters, and Hakim said at one time there were 360, they all emanate from the one. The Egyptians always believed in the one source, God. If you love the term God, it's the one source of all that is. It's your heart. And then everything breathes out into these beautiful archetypal energies. They're the netters, they're the angels. The angels were angles of light, angels, archetypal patterned energies. So each one of them does represent many different things. Isis is Sirius. She's the divine mother. She's the Suf, the Sophia, the wisdom of the divine feminine. She's so many different things. So this is what makes it so interesting and so complicated. But once you see the patterns, then you know. So you can begin to understand without even researching. It's really phenomenal, because they actually gave us everything in these fractal patterns of how life really is. And when you understand, it's nature's patterns. If you know, we all grow with Fibonacci spiraling, well, so did the netters. So it's this, again, as above, so below. But back to your concept of worshiping, we worship something outside ourselves. They worshiped the netter within and without. So Isis was part of me. Osiris is part of me. All men and women became Osiris at death. And the cycle we're in now was considered to be death. We have fallen into containment. We're not alive. We're in the coffin, the sarcophagus. See, it's all symbolism. We're wrapped in our own wings, the mummification. And then the Great Awakening, which is where we're headed now, is when we open our wings. That's the new dawn, but that's the winged Kepper. That's when all the netters, and we're netters, forces of nature, we open our wings and fly into the sun. So it's day cycle, night cycle.
There's so much here, and this
I
is so.
know.
So this is one of the things I've heard you say that I think is really interesting. That you talked about, going from formless to form that we're in right now, in a way, is being hostage,
Yes.
like being hostage in the net.
Yes. They even have the imagery for this. It's funny because I saw these nets all over Egypt in the temples on papyrus, and they're beautiful, and they're containing birds and other animals. And at Edfu, you even see a beautiful image of it on the temple wall, where it has human beings with their hands tied behind their back. They're held hostage. This was a symbol of being held hostage in a belief that we are our bodies. We forgot that we're multidimensional beings. And in believing we are our bodies, we're believing in separation. And therefore, all of these emotions like fear and anger can be generated through agendas of the separation, that someone may be threatening you, or this need for survival because we believe death is real. There is no death. We're existing on the other plane already. So it's just, we're in this moment we chose to be in this moment of a confined perception, because we get to experience life. We get to experience time. and we're on, what the ancients would have called, well, actually, Joseph Campbell called the hero's journey, which is literally Osiris, wrapped in his own wings on his journey to become the hero, which in ancient Egypt was Horus. His ancient name was Heru. He was the hero of the hero's journey. And of course, he is the hawk who opens his wings. So that is the hero's journey of one becoming the other. In the heavens, it's mirrored as Orion, and on the other side of the heavens is Ophiuchus. And so you have Horus as Ophiuchus, as the serpent bearer in the heavens, and he's today known as the 13th zodiac sign, and Osiris is on the other side. So this is, again, the hero's journey in the heavens.
Yeah. And what you're saying is, everyone listening, that we are all on our own hero's journey, separate and together.
Exactly. Thank you. I tend to just go, and I apologize for that. The assumption that everyone knows exactly what I'm talking about. But yes, that's exactly what I'm saying. This is what they were projecting to us. It wasn't something happening outside ourselves, it was something happening to us. That's what's so fascinating. And as I said, instead of worshiping them as something that's separate from us, they were revering it as their story happening within. If you were needed healing, you might find an amulet of like Sekhmet, because she was known as the healing mother. So you might get of Sekhmet, and that energy would have, because of the form and shape of Sekhmet, the interaction between you and that object would be real, and it could have a beneficial effect on you. There was a netter it was a hippo netter, feminine netter. She was Taret. She was the great mother. She was, she's the cosmic cow in the not Hathor, but in the circumpolar stars. And she is the one they would go to if they wanted to give birth. So the hippopotamus, this beautiful Taret, was the one who would not only give them luck for childbirth, but also be the protector, as would another netter called Bess. So again, it's not something outside. It's not a story that these netters actually walk the earth. They are walking the earth as you and me, as all of these archetypal energies within us.
And so the relationship they then had with the forces of nature around them, the understanding they had, was so deep. I know that even they would know everything about a certain animal. They had this incredible understanding about their connection to the world around them. Now, obviously, they didn't have as many distractions as we do today, but it does feel like we're being invited to come back into greater balance, harmony, and connection to our place within the world and with all of these forces of nature.
Yeah, I agree. You're absolutely right. And we are in that moment. This is the game-changing point. The way I can reference that is, if the Egyptians were incredibly obsessed with the circumpolar stars. And the circumpolar stars are created by when the axis of the Earth falls 23.5 degrees, and then we keep revolving, right? We actually draw with the axis of the Earth a circle in the heavens in the northern hemisphere. And these are the circumpolar or never setting stars. So, of course, it was their goal to become one of these never setting stars, meaning we wouldn't have to come back and live another Earth-based lifetime again. But again, it's an idea expressed. They understood that, time and space are reference points in a left brain mentality, but it's linear time, and we can't perceive of a nonlinear time. They understood a nonlinear time as well. But these reference points for us in left brain consciousness is, we're watching this spin, and the North Pole is always where the axis of the Earth is pointing to. Right now, it's pointing to Polaris, polarity, right? That's total left brain consciousness. Exactly around 12,000 years ago, give or take, it was pointing toward Vega, and that's the divine feminine. So we've gone from the matriarchal perception of reality, or right brain perception, and we've moved all the way around to Polaris, or complete polarity or separation consciousness. And so we can see this path in the heavens. We're there. So it's time to start moving back. And this is that flipping point when we begin to migrate, as I said, back into the divine feminine
So
consciousness, the heart-based.
we're at that point right now where it's flipping back to move back towards Vega.
Yeah.
Okay.
And they say this too. If those many of the researchers of the Vedic cycles also speak about this as this one moment in time. And even I think it's Bibo Misra speaks about March of this year being the turning point out of Kali Yuga into what's the next one? I think it begins with a T, having one of those moments. Anyway, the next one moving up.
Maybe a more gentle Yuga, moving to.
Exactly. Sacha is up here, so it's the one in between. But yes, it's all happening now when we can feel it. We can feel we're in these, everything's become so surreal. AI has changed the way we even, how can we believe anything we see, hear, or feel when there's so much out there that looks real and it's not? So we have to go within. We don't have to, but I would say we need to go within to really discern what it is we're experiencing.
I am just beginning to understand it. In the past maybe month even, I was not even really paying attention to it, and now I'm not quite sure how I feel about all this, but it's where we're going. And so yes, I agree with you that we have to, well, we should go deep within to find your center, to not be so swayed. And that's, I think, another thing in this moment right now, this polarity is there's so much division. There's so many ways that people are trying to be pitted against each other. And so I think we are in this phase of moving from this polarity back towards unity conscious, back towards oneness, but we're still in this moment of having to discern all of these influences hitting all of us with information, disinformation. So it's a challenging time right now for most people, I think.
It truly is. When I really, it has been in place for decades. It's just now in our face. It's free to everybody. It's on our devices. Everything that we use is suddenly using AI, and I didn't say it could. And I was one of the ones that said, I will never use AI. It's even my colleague said, Patricia, you could, AI could write your book. AI can create your documentary. It's like, no, because to me, it's the antithesis of what was the real, the truth of the ancients, which is all heart based, and we're going into total mind based. And it's a bit terrifying for me because it's almost machine like. We're just allowing, AI to write everything for us. We lose our sensibilities, I think, when we allow that to happen. On the other hand, I'm a big fan of biogeometry and Dr. Ibrahim Karim. I love that he doesn't speak negatively. He looks for solutions, and he has solutions that are helping to make, things like, if you believe like radiation in any of its forms can have a negative effect on the body, but he's developed tools that negate that and sometimes even make what seems negative into something beneficial. And I heard him asked about AI, and he said AI is what's happening. It's like we can't, as you said, we can't fight it. But he said, what's happening, and now watch this with these new children being born. I know so many. My friends' children just have these genius intellects, these minds that are just mind blowing, but they have so much trouble with their emotions. And, I thought of this as he was saying, what happens is when we start going in, we use computers and then we're moving into AI, that it, as that reflection, what we're doing is reflected back in reality and our awareness. And so the new children are coming in with super minds like supercomputers. And he said, the thing to do, and this is fascinating for me, and I bring it forward because it's still reeling in my mind. He says, connect AI to plants. Like the mycelium is something that connects everything in the forest. And when a tree is in trouble, let's say it needs water, the mycelium sends the word out. And all the things in the forest come together to save the tree that's ailing. And this is where we need to be. So, what an amazing concept to think that, yes, can we connect AI to something that, is this natural, for it's nature and it's all beauty. It has no sense of wanting to hurt or threaten anyone. It only seeks to help the whole, the unified. And so in that case, AI could be a beautiful thing.
Oh, that's a beautiful perspective. His work is fascinating. I have one of his books that I have not read, but some of the symbols that I've used sometimes are amazing. I have one of his pendulums that I use a fair bit. So he does have incredible work. It's called biogeometry, if anyone wants to look into it. And his name is Dr.
Dr. Ibrahim Karim.
Okay. Yeah. So if you want to look into biogeometry, it's a fascinating topic. So go ahead.
I was just going to say, and it's all based on ancient Egypt and what was known here. So it makes it even more fascinating for me. But please.
Well, and using the forces of nature also and that's how he's, and people like, I have someone I know who had a biogeometrist come in and do like work with their home. It's not interior design, but they place symbols in different corners and different areas, are these symbols to really work with the frequency, I think, and the energetics of your home and your land.
It makes a difference. And, we don't want to use up all our time talking about biogeometry, but yes, his tools and his symbols, they're symbols for health that are based on the flow of your internal organs. And there are symbols to literally, as you said, negate certain things, technology in your home. I mean, basic things that he tells you to, your bed. If your bed, the post or the top of your bed is up against the wall, you're closer to the electronics within your wall, the electricity. Pull it out about 6 inches, and that frees you. We spend a lot of time sleeping. It can free you from just that. That is
Great tip.
creating disease within your body, because we are the body electric. We are made up of waveform. Everything is waveform. Tesla said it, and Einstein. Everyone's. We know this today. Physicists tell us this. We are waveform. We are electrical, by electromagnetic beings, and so every frequency has an effect on our health. And this is so important moving forward for us to recognize, to feel this flow or lack of flow, and so that we can remove those obstacles that are creating that dis-ease within us.
That's such
Yeah.
important information, and I think people are beginning to understand this more. There's a lot of, like, quantum biologists who are talking about some of
Yes.
these things. People are starting to listen to. They're amazing, amazing conversations. I'd love to pull it back because I think this is so fascinating. So, Patricia has this, she lived in the States for many years. She's been in Egypt for 16 years. She knew she would move to Egypt eventually. But when she was a teenager, she had some really unusual experiences, and I think these experiences she had as a teenager has led her to have this greater understanding of this multidimensional universe that we live in. So maybe if you could talk about that and how that informs your work that you do today.
It really it shaped who I am today, and it started when I was very young with just dreams of flying. I would dream, I'd be in these wonderful dreams and have that moment when I wanted to escape a situation, and I'd beam myself up, or, just fly. Sometimes I could just lift. But as I got older into my teens, I suddenly had this sensation of, and this is how it normally starts, where you feel like that your body is completely paralyzed. And I heard this noise, this sound. It was like an electromagnetic sound in my ears. And yet I was totally aware, and I would feel an arm go up, or, and what was happening, it was the beginning of my relationship with astral projection. And I started leaving my body, and it was a rocky road, because you don't know what it is, and when you're young, it can be a little terrifying. But I was introduced to people at different places. Like, I would go to a psychic fair with my friend, and I'm talking decades ago. I'm much older. And we'd go to a psychic fair, and I sat under a pyramid once, and you know It's a long story, but we walk in. I sit under this pyramid. I got in line to do this. I had been out late the night before, and thought I could use some energy. And when I came out, the person that was offering this stood there, and he said, "Do you know what you just did?" And I said, "No." He had tape around the bottom of the chair underneath the pyramid, and I had moved the chair just by sitting it in about 2 or 3 inches. And he said, "Do you astral project?" And I said yes. And he was actually right. The reason he was offering this is he was writing a book about astral projection. And so, he wanted to interview me for the book. But again, I was quite young, and my mother's like, no. You're not going to hang out with an older man and write a book, kind of thing, back in the day. But anyway, I was beginning to learn more, and people kept coming to me that started to explain what was happening. And I researched it and found out a lot more about it. But as I became, I started to go at will and started to play with it, because I could do so many things. And even like my brother would test me, or a neighbor would test me, and are you really doing this? And I would find myself, that night I would be in my neighbor's home, and they would be there with their family, and I saw a dog jump up on their counter and eat a pie. Sounds something was totally ridiculous. And yet, when I told her, she said that's exactly what happened. They had company, and they had brought a dog, and it ate the dessert, the pie. And these were the kind of experiences I was having. And yet, part of me knew that this isn't as real as it sounds, because we can remote view. And I knew this because I had done it. It's something we all can do. It's so easy. And so, even though it's, you have all the sensations and you're floating and doing all of this, we are capable of all of these things. So, what is astral projection? But what I really discerned is, I was going to other planets. I was going to classrooms in the middle of the night with other people, and these wonderful masters were teaching, and I would come back and I'd be like, oh, I can't remember what did I learn. But it all was going into my subconscious.
All being encoded within you.
Exactly, exactly. But my one of my greatest lessons was that there were some times I would leave my body ready for the adventure, and I always went, my deal was to go for the window, because I wanted to go out and see the world. And I would hit the window and I couldn't get out. And this would happen a few times. And I'd go through these things like, I am, somebody said, just say you are the light, and you are, it's like anything to get yourself out. And I started to realize what's really interesting, and this would work once I again reclaimed my inner power, I could get through. But what I learned is it was giving me the lesson of I was putting up barriers in my daily life. And it made me look within to see what I was doing and why I was putting up walls. I learned so much about myself through this process, and interdimensionality, and how to communicate and exist in these other dimensions. And so, yes, at some point, I thought I was going to use it as a tool to learn all the secrets, because I was born asking all these questions. Where am I? Why am I here? What is this? What's my purpose? And I thought I was going to get all those answers. But it's a conversation you have with yourself. This is what astral projection is. And it can't give you any more than you are ready to learn. And it's an interaction, it's your own process. And we can do this without the tools, without astral projection, without a guru. This is an inner journey that we're all on. And it's literally learning to center ourselves, to live as authentic beings, walk in integrity. And when we do this, we literally come to a point, our awareness starts to rise from our root chakra, and we begin to see through the veil. And this is the beauty of the journey. We don't want to do this, and look outside ourselves to have somebody show us the way. We really want to do this ourselves. Then it becomes real, and we know it's real.
Yeah. And gently, you do see people who just want to force it and like do everything to, I want to get to the destination, but it's not the destination, it's the journey. It's the journey through the centers, through the levels, through the realms, like you spoke of. Even objects have 7 levels. I think that idea of the 7 levels, like these truths within truths within truths that you
Beautiful.
are working through to enjoy that journey of it as opposed to arriving somewhere.
Beautifully spoken. Absolutely.
One thing that I have found really interesting about your work that I just recently understood is that so you can meet Patricia, and she does these incredible metaphysical tours in Egypt that I would love to participate in. But what I didn't understand until listening to you was when you go and you look, particularly if you go with someone like Patricia, is it's not just looking at the art and the engravings and the structure, but it is that there is a living energy that is still imbued in many of these objects. And I have a picture of something I do want to show you from my phone. But this was from many years ago before AI. This is that I snapped a screenshot on Facebook. I know there's so many places where this living energy is held within these statues and different objects. But there seems to be one particular statue that I see a lot of energy around. So it's the one of Sekhmet. Know which temple she's in or which pyramid she's in. But this particular picture, people go in and have these life-changing experiences. They really feel like they're with a living being. And you'll see orbs flying all over the place. I've seen so many interesting pictures, and I wish I had all of them. I had to go into my photos because I have, 50,000 photos and put in Sekhmet to see what would come up. And this particular photo came up. If you can see this. So, and I don't know where this comes from, but that is a light being with, it looks like hands on top of, this is from many years ago before AI, and Sekhmet is sort of dark in the very back. So, can you talk a little bit about the energies of these places that you go and visit and maybe some experiences you've had? Because some of these things that show up on film are absolutely incredible.
It's nothing like being there. And you're absolutely right. And again, there is a science to it, and in that, when they decided to build a structure, a pyramid, a temple, it was the place that was most important, and it was a place on Earth that had the right energetic imprint. And so normally what we find underneath these sacred sites are two flows of running water that cross each other. And when you do that, whenever you cross two flows of energy, you create a vortex or a portal. And so when you think about this is happening underneath. So it's creating not only that portal, but an ionic energy, very powerful energy. And they also chose places again for any kind of specific kind of water, and they built channels of running water throughout the structures. And so you'd find wells, oftentimes two wells and then two channels of running water, and then you have the temple itself. And they created it in such a way that, and there's so many things that they did, so you have this breath that's going on, this beautifully supercharged energy within the chambers, and specific areas where that energy is even more charged. So consider you're out in the courtyard and you're ready to walk in, and you go through your first chamber and you feel this powerful energy. But the ceiling represented the heavens, and the earth, the floor was the earth. And so everything was mirrored as above, so below. And the columns were holding up the heavens, and that was the atmosphere was in between. So you have earth, air, water, and fire. Okay, so because the heavens are fire, we have the earth and then the water and air that create the atmosphere. So as you move back through the temple, the floor is actually rising. Most people don't even realize this. The ceiling is coming down, and it keeps going as you walk through the interdimensional gateways. You're basically walking through the human body until you get to the pineal gland, the Holy of Holies, which is where heaven meets earth, portal to the other dimensions. You also have a heart chamber that has the same effect in many cases. And so you have this temple, as you're walking through it, is interacting with you. And that's what's so fantastic. So you may not be aware, but I often laugh because, some people come and they don't know what's going on, and they have moments in certain temples, they suddenly fall apart and start crying. And I've seen grown men. I've seen all types of people come, and even we call them the tag-alongs that come along with a partner, and they
Right.
don't really know why they're there. And sometimes they have the greatest, experiences. But they have that moment. I think it's this memory or this imprint that, they are supposed to experience this. And it brings tears to their eyes. Um, I have those moments in front of Sekhmet, and just did at the winter solstice. And yeah, I'll speak to that. And so you have this whole temple is alive. This is a living, breathing entity that was created. The pyramids are alive. The Giza Plateau is alive with all of this energy. And of course, we have these beautiful statues. And you describe Sekhmet, who is at Karnak Temple, in a chamber. She is this amazing black statue. It's a black granite, a very rare type of black granite. We don't know how long she's been there in the same place. Hakim said probably the oldest statue still standing in the same place that it was originally placed on Earth. And she was created with a right brain consciousness. And so a right brain, when you look at the features, and Christopher Dunn has talked about this with some of the statues as well, the perfect synchronicity of the two sides. And this is how we define beauty, perfect harmony of two sides of self. And so the statues are made in perfection because they felt the form. And they could create in perfection in every shape, every color, every angle, every type of stone has an energetic effect on the human body. But they embody these statues with archetypal energies. So, this force of nature that is Sekhmet, which is the divine mother, the sacred mother energy, she's the protective love of the mother. She's the healing and the nurturing love of the mother. And you stand before her, and you're face to face with the mother inside you. And that mother can sometimes reprimand you and literally say, why aren't you speaking your truth? Why aren't you standing in your power? Release the things that no longer serve you. Or she can perceive all of the struggles and challenges that you're going through. And she can look at you and give you that big hug that you needed more than anything else in the world. And she can bring those tears to your eyes. But either way, you are changed when you stand there and when you leave. And this is what's so powerful about these ancient structures. They were fashioned, crafted by these incredible, you know, I hate to say minds, I'd say hearts, fashioned with these incredible hearts to create this effect for us as we moved into left brain consciousness. This is our portal back to remembering who we are. Sekhmet also is the one who tells us to tear open your chest and show your heart. Reveal the hidden heart. Because this is what's happened to us. We have, since we were children, been told to not be vulnerable, to hide your emotions, hide your truth. Don't say that, don't cry or I'll give you something to cry about. Sekhmet says, cry, get it out. Sekhmet says, show your heart, show your emotion, show your love, because this is what will connect and unify all of us again.
That makes me want to cry. You're bringing tears to my eyes just hearing this from you. And this is the time that we're in, moving back towards this unity consciousness. We all do need to reveal our true hearts, move back into, to communicate, to listen with our hearts, to speak with our hearts, to come back into that unifying, conscious, collective collaboration with our fellow humans. That is really beautiful. I'd love to, so thank you for all of that. So that's really beautiful messages. I'd love to talk a little bit and come back to, so my dad is huge. He loves ancient Egypt, has been many times. He's been in the king's chamber. He was able to go and ohm inside and hear hear the acoustics in there. And we were talking about you a little bit, and he had a question for you. And his question was, what was your view of the Great Pyramid being used for initiation?
Good question. You know, when people ask me how old the pyramids are, I have to laugh because, you know, our perception of time is this, and their perception of time was something so much more expansive. And so I don't answer that. If I had to, based on linear time, I'd say about 10,000 years old. A lot of people say older, but I understand from the cycles that but again, it's all an illusion. It's the illusion we create in our left brained intelligence. I don't believe the pyramids were created for people to have initiations. I think they were created to generate a force field, a field of energy coupled with the running water under the plateau. I mean, this literally, people call it a machine. I think it was projecting a field of energy that allowed us, as we started to devolve in consciousness, allowed them to still enjoy and celebrate that beautiful higher awareness. I think it's that 0 point energy. And I think they emanated this powerful energy and directed it into the temples. Hakim called them the purbas, the place of the soul, the spirit. And the pyramids were pernetters, places of energy. So the energy is created and it emanates throughout the area. It also affects the agriculture. If you study paramagnetism, you look that up, you'll find a field of work that's absolutely incredible that speaks to how the towers in the world and the pyramids create this paramagnetic, energy that is literally allowing us to move through states of altered consciousness to different dimensions. And so, can you imagine having that ability? And then as we go through time, we forget or we even lose the ability to connect with it. And we start to quarry it and take the casing stones off and build, other structures. And in fact, we see, the use of quarrying all over Egypt. And so they lost that initial energetic imprint, but it's still alive. It's still there. And yes, when you're inside the pyramids, and my feeling is, yes, I think at one time they were absolutely used for initiations because you're looking at a place of, it has this interdimensional energy, this
Right.
powerful energy. And I believe, again, they weren't built for people, but so you actually had stone ramps. It would not have been easy to get up into those areas without building. We built the steps and the railings, and I'm sure that happened much earlier, and they were used by early mystery schools or by different groups of people to have those initiations. There are people that have memories. There's the book that was written called An Initiation, about a memory of going through initiations. We still do it today. Groups go in and they wear white flowing gowns, and they have their initiations. And the key is, when we go in, as Hakim taught, it's about resonance. The whole key is, Hakim said that all of these chambers, each one has a different frequency. It resonates to a different frequency, a different netter, an archetypal energy that helps to awaken that sense, that latent sense that we forgot we have within. He said the 360 netters were 360 senses we forgot we have. So we can awaken that netter within us, that relationship with that netter within us, by entering these chambers or the temples. This is why it's the temple of Hathor, the temple of Isis. You go in and through your interaction with the space, the living space, you awaken that energy within, that sensibility, that awareness within yourself. And this is, the initiates would actually visit each one of the sites with a different purpose in mind.
That's amazing. So just to break down a little bit what she's saying, there's so much to take in there. But Hakeem, who, if I'm correct, ended up being your father-in-law, is that correct?
He did.
So she ended up coming back to Egypt after several trips and marrying Hakeem's son. And they developed together this mysteries, the
The
Kemet.
Kemet school, yes.
So she's part of this lineage of incredible. We could do a whole series on her father-in-law, because we don't have time to get into it. He's been featured in television shows, and there's so much to say, but we don't have time to get into him. Maybe another time we'll get her back on, because there's a lot to say there. But what he's saying is that, so consciousness sort of can evolve and devolve. And we have devolved. And at some point, we had all of these 360 forces within us that were activated. And as we devolved, we lost those senses. And so now we're back in this period now where we're moving back from this devolution that we've been and back towards an evolution, and we can reawaken those abilities that are probably dormant within us. Is that correct?
That's exactly what he would have said.
Okay. Which I have to spend a lot more time with, because this is all new to me. I'm fascinated by this entire conversation. Of course, I'll be working on trying to reawaken within myself some of these forces. Um, so yeah, that is incredible. But I want to come back, and I don't know if we talked in the beginning of the podcast about how there could be 7 levels to different things. We have 7 chakras where you could move from your base chakra and move up. I heard you say on another podcast, and this is particularly interesting to me because I had an experience that caused massive transformation. I do healing work myself, and many years ago, I had a client, and I was at their head, and they had had a lot happening with them. They had a lot of trauma, a lot that was going on with them. And I was just doing some energetic work at their head, and I suddenly saw Anubis at their feet, which was really surprising for me to see an Egyptian god. And if you don't know who Anubis is, he's known as being, like, you would typically refer to him maybe as the god of the dead, but he's so much more than that. And he's the jackal-headed god. So I was really surprised to see this. And I ended up, sometimes I'll tell someone about the session, and I mentioned, but it felt really beautiful. Like, he was working in this very healing way. It wasn't that she was about to die. He was working in this beautiful healing. This energy was working with me in this beautiful healing way. And I told it to her, and the look on her face was so terrified. And I thought, I need to I had so much information coming in, and I thought, I need to understand this more. So I ended up embarking on going to the Arthur Findlay College several times, doing a lot of work with like psychic mediumship and all of that, because I'm like, I need to understand how to work with this more. I can't scare people. I need to understand what's going on here. So it really triggered another huge growth opportunity for me. So you mentioned how, as you go through these levels, that Anubis sort of can be at the gate, getting ready to open the portal or open the gate. Can you speak about that a little bit?
I can. When we talk about Anubis being the god of the dead, again, there is no death. So the idea, and to explain why this perception of the gods and the netters has devolved to such a state, Hakim said this happened at the age of Amun, and I call it's basically the age of Taurus, when we actually fall deeply into form. Taurus is earth. It's material, it's the body, it's the physical. And in the age of Taurus, about 6,000 years ago, which strangely enough, a lot of the religious dogma in the world, dates civilization back 6,000 years. Because when we fall completely into a perception that I'm only my body, that's when the need for a system, for a civilization, comes into play. And of course, the system also is part of, it's not only governmental and it's the priesthood. They develop these religions. The priesthood at that time introduced the concept of death and a heaven and hell. And, there was a beast that, they would weigh the heart against the feather. And if your heart, so I'm just going into this, and they start to change the stories to benefit themselves and to keep us in a place of fear and anger and a need to go into the temples and give offerings. And even the pharaohs and the nobles were buried with all kinds of gold. And who do you think had the keys to the tombs? It was always the priest, of course. So basically the priesthood, the temples were getting wealthy because based on the religion that they developed. And I don't want to go any further into that. But this is, when sometimes I always say, there are certain things like saying that Anubis is the god of the dead I call that a game of the priests, just to simplify it.
Thank
When in
you.
actuality, you had it right. He is the path opener for us on our journey, that hero's journey, back to our pineal gland. That's Horus, okay? If we're considering walking through the temple. And so he's there at every chakra, opening the doors. There's your 7 levels. So he opens the door so that the base perception of everything is root chakra. This is a mouse. This is what it is. This is a phone. This table is real. That's root chakra. But as we start to move through our chakras, our inner suns, right, Ra, we start to move up and we begin to realize it's so much more, and that this isn't really a table. And we begin to see through the veil and the illusion to the truth. And that's how everything has these different layers of meaning. In order to see this meaning, I mean, there are a lot of Tibetan monks, and there are people in India that have gotten to that point where they can be in 2 places at one time and walk through doors and walls and things like this. That's all these different stages. Anubis is there at each one of those gateways as the path opener. That was really his title. So he's opening the path for us to move through. And when, we are right now, again, remember, considered dead, and he's moving us through to our awakening. And then Whippawat was the other form of Anubis. He was the white wolf or the gray wolf, and he's the one that opens the gates back into the physical form. So always this up and down, this reversal, this cycle of the breath of life. The breath goes out into separation, consciousness, and then the breath you inhale back to your heart, back to your center. That's the great yogic breath with 2 moments of silence. That's the basic cycle of life. Sorry.
Oh, I love it. So Anubis is really helping us to
Yes,
free ourselves from being a hostage within the net.
that's exactly it. So at the foot of her bed, that was a beautiful symbol of her own journey and possibly yours, because it was your vision. And so in what you were dealing with, he was there to help you in her healing, which was opening those gateways, those pathways for her to evolve.
Yeah. And then also for me, pushing me further along on my journey, because
Yes.
that was a huge moment that really was like, I have to expand and understand this more.
Well, I would go one step further and say that this could be like your totem. You are the path opener. This is your function. And this is what your work is doing. You're opening the path for people to heal or to find themselves.
Oh my gosh, do you know what? I'm going to start crying because when I was about 25, I had this very powerful dream, but it wasn't a dream. And I was in another dimension. And what the words, and this is stuck with me, is like, and I never even talked about this, but in this dream, what I was told is, you are a pathfinder.
Beautiful. Your dreams hold so much information about yourself, and now you can embrace and embody it. And it is you. Step into it, step into your power. That's your superpower.
Wow, this has been a personally incredible session for me. I feel like, so I hope that everyone else can feel like how much she has to share. I mean, this is transformational just having this conversation with you. So that is so beautiful. Patricia, I could keep you on for hours and hours. I'd love to have you come back on at another time if we can set that up, because we could sit here and talk forever. I know all of you want to go to Egypt, because I do, and go on tours with Patricia. Tell us how we all can connect with you.
Thank you. You can find me and my work and the events that I'm actually holding on horusrising.com. I've developed this whole other area. I still have the Kemet School site with Yosef, but Horus Rising is more about my work, the metaphysical, the mythology, symbolism, and so much more. So yeah, it's just simply www.horusrising.com. And we also have Horus Rising Productions YouTube channel, where I've been doing podcasts with my colleague, Alan Peoples, for about, 3 or 4 years now. So yeah, and everybody wanted me to write a book, and I wrote during the pandemic. I wrote 600 pages, but the problem is the material was not, it's not linear. And I couldn't find a way to put it in a linear format. And so I said, Alan, we've got to do the podcasts. And he agreed. It's a way that I can keep growing the knowledge as it comes to me. Every time I go into the temples, I get more and more downloads. And I wake up in the morning and I get these downloads, and it's like, now I completely, but you never completely get it, and that's the joy of this journey. It's like, wow, another layer. And yeah,
I've been listening to her podcast. I highly recommend it. If you're intrigued by this information, definitely find her on YouTube. That just sparked a question. I know we're wrapping up, but you did mention that at the solstice you were crying in front of Sekhmet. Was anything you can share about that moment of being touched in that way?
I can. I had just, every December 21st, and whenever the solstice is in Egypt, in Karnak, there's this rising of the sun at the end of I call it the Stargate path in the temple. The sun rises up the center path. I've been 3 times now, and the last 2 years I've gone with a friend of mine and her son. And you have this experience of, I go back in time and I'm there with these people that totally recognized how profound that experience is. And the sun rises and it hits your face, and it's hard to explain. And so this year, and normally we always go to Sekhmet afterwards, but one of my friends wasn't feeling well and they wanted to go back to the hotel. And I had my driver take them back, and I stayed, and I went to Sekhmet by myself. And I stood before her, and I know the guards, and you do need to give them a nice tip, because especially on the solstice, because there was a line, for so far. It used to be nobody knew where Sekhmet was. Nobody knew who Sekhmet was, but more and more people are discovering her. And anyway, I had my moments, and I stood before her, and she enveloped me with so much love and so much understanding. We also need to be understood. And, you look into her eyes, and her eyes are alive. And I can't explain that. That's something you have to experience. But when you stand before her, you'll see it. She, and again, statue is a concha stone. No, when it's crafted in this way, it has this energy. And in this case, this powerful, loving, incredible mother energy. And that's what she gave me. It's what I needed. It's what she gave me. And in this way, it empowers you. And so the tears were, they were tears of acknowledgement. It was sort of like this depth of knowing, and this connection of, again, that Sekhmet within myself. And it's like, it's always been there. It's like she's telling you, it's always been there. I'm always there. All you need to do is awaken that within yourself.
I'm going to leave everybody with that. Just awaken these energies within yourself that we all have the capacity to do if we consciously choose that, I think. It's not for some, it's for all, if you choose to, I believe. Patricia, thank you so much for being on today. I've loved this conversation.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure and an honor. Thank you very much.
Absolutely. I'll see you all next time. Thank you for staying with us.